Dr. Tai-Won Kim stared at the readings on his computer screen for the fifth time. He rubbed his tired eyes, but the strange energy patterns didn't change. After 20 years of searching the stars for signs of alien life, he had found something that couldn't be explained by natural causes. "Computer, run the analysis again," he said, reaching for his cold coffee. The massive telescope array on Mars had picked up these unusual signals 3 days ago, and he hadn't slept properly since then. The computer beeped. "Analysis complete. Energy signature matches no known natural phenomena in database." Tai-Won's hands shook as he picked up his phone. As Earth's leading expert in finding alien life, he knew he had to report this to the right people. He called the Earth Defense Force headquarters. "This is Captain Jae-yun Park," a clear, professional voice answered. "Captain, this is Dr. Kim from the Mars Observatory. I need to report something unusual." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "We have detected artificial signals approaching our solar system." There was a moment of silence on the other end. "How certain are you, Doctor?" "The energy patterns show clear signs of intelligent design. They're moving faster than light, which means whoever made them has technology far beyond ours." Within an hour, the news spread through the highest levels of Earth's government. By the next morning, telescopes across the solar system were pointed at the approaching signals. The energy patterns were coming from what looked like massive ships made of crystal, unlike anything humans had ever built. 3 days later, the ships entered the solar system. They were beautiful and terrifying. Huge crystal structures that seemed to glow from within. Earth's leaders decided to send a welcome message, hoping the visitors were friendly. The aliens responded quickly. They called themselves the Anjin, and they wanted to meet Earth's leaders. They chose the new Mars colony for their first meeting, saying it showed humanity's growth as a species. Captain Jae-yun Park stood at the Mars spaceport, watching the crystal ship land. As head of First Contact Security, she had trained for this moment, but nothing could have prepared her for the sight of the actual aliens. The Anjin looked almost human, but too perfect. They were tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to shimmer like their ships. Their leader, who called himself Supreme Observer Do-hyun, stepped forward with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Greetings, children of Earth," Do-hyun said in perfect English. "We have come to evaluate your species." Jae-yun noticed how he called humans children. It reminded her of how European explorers once talked to native peoples they met. This wasn't a good sign. Dr. Kim, who was also at the meeting, asked, "Evaluate us. For what purpose?" Do-hyun's smile widened. "To see if you are ready to join the greater cosmic community, of course. We are guardians of order in this part of the galaxy. We help developing species grow, if they prove worthy." Over the next few weeks, the Anjin shared some of their knowledge with humans. They showed amazing technology. Machines that could heal any injury, devices that could create food from raw atoms, and engines that bent space itself. But they never explained how anything worked. They just showed what they could do. Jae-yun spent a lot of time with them as their security liaison. She noticed things that worried her. The Anjin never seemed surprised by anything. They acted like they knew exactly what humans would do before they did it. When humans got excited about their technology, the aliens would share knowing looks, like adults watching children play with toys. One day, Jae-yun found Dr. Kim working late in his lab. He looked worried. "Captain Park, look at this," he said, showing her his computer. "I've been studying the Anjin's behavior patterns. They're too perfect. Every response, every action. It's like they're following a script." "What do you mean?" Jae-yun asked, looking at the complex charts on his screen. "I think they're not really making decisions. They're following very advanced programs. Even their ships. They don't have pilots. They're run by artificial intelligence." He looked up at her. "I don't think the Anjin know how to think for themselves anymore." Before they could discuss this more, alarms started blaring throughout the Mars colony. The Anjin ships were moving, spreading out around Mars and Earth in a perfect pattern. Supreme Observer Du Hyun's voice came through all communication channels. People of Earth, your evaluation begins now. We will test your species' worthiness through a series of challenges. Your performance will determine your fate. Jae-yun rushed to the command center. On the screens, she could see the crystal ships taking positions around both planets. Earth's ships and weapons couldn't stop them. They were too advanced. What kind of tests? Earth's president asked through the emergency channel. That would defeat the purpose, Du Hyun replied. You must prove yourselves without preparation. This is how we determine which species deserve to survive. Dr. Kim's words echoed in Jae-yun's mind. The Onjin followed programs. They didn't think for themselves. Maybe that was important. Maybe that was a weakness humans could use. She looked at the perfect pattern of their ships and remembered playing chess as a child. The best players didn't just follow rules. They thought creatively. The Onjin might be more advanced, but if they couldn't think outside their programming, they might not be stronger. Jae-yun opened a secure channel to Earth's military command. This is Captain Park. I need to speak with the Joint Chiefs. I think I know how we can handle these tests. As she waited for the connection, she watched the crystal ships glowing against the black sky. The Onjin thought they were testing humanity, but maybe humanity would end up testing them instead. In his lab, Dr. Kim was already gathering data, studying every detail of the aliens' behavior. If they were going to survive these tests, they needed to understand their testers first. The next few weeks would determine the fate of humanity, but neither Jae-yun nor Taiwan planned to fail. The Onjin had no idea that their perfect programmed minds were about to face something they couldn't predict: human creativity and determination. Their tests were about to become more complicated than their programs had planned for. As the first day of testing approached, Earth prepared itself. Humanity had faced many challenges in its history, but this would be different. This time, they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to prove that sometimes the smartest species isn't the one with the most advanced technology, but the one that knows how to think for itself. Jae-yun looked at the latest reports from Earth's defenses. They were ready. Let the testing begin. The Onjin would soon learn that humanity wasn't just another species to be evaluated. They were about to become the hardest test the Onjin had ever faced. The first test came at dawn. Commander He-jin of the Onjin Science Division appeared on every screen on Earth and Mars. His perfect face showed no emotion as he spoke. Your first evaluation will test your species' problem-solving abilities, he said. We have placed 3 devices in different cities on Earth. Each device creates a field that stops all electronic devices from working. You have 6 hours to disable these devices before they expand to cover your entire planet. Jae-yun Park stood in the Mars Command Center, watching the chaos unfold on Earth. The devices had been placed in Tokyo, London, and Sao Paulo. In these cities, nothing electronic worked. No phones, no computers, no cars. Millions of people were trapped. It's like they're playing with us, Dr. Kim said, standing beside her. He hadn't slept in 2 days, studying the Onjin's patterns. They want to see how we handle pressure. Security Director Yum-ho appeared on the emergency channel. The president has ordered our best teams to handle this situation. Dr. Kim, we need your help understanding these devices. Taiwan looked at his data readings. The devices use some kind of energy field we've never seen before. But remember what we learned. The Onjin follow patterns. They wouldn't give us a test we couldn't solve. Jae-yun noticed something on one of the working screens. Look at how they placed the devices, she said. It's a perfect triangle if you draw lines between the cities on a globe. Everything they do is about perfect patterns. This gave Dr. Kim an idea. He quickly did some calculations on his computer. The energy fields aren't random. They're following a mathematical pattern too. If we can understand the pattern, we can find a way to disrupt it. Teams of scientists and engineers worked together, following Dr. Kim's guidance. They noticed that while modern electronics didn't work near the devices, simple mechanical tools still did. This was their first clue. With only 2 hours left, They found a solution. The devices needed perfect symmetry to work. If they could push them even slightly out of position, the fields would collapse. They used simple machines, levers and pulleys, to move the devices just a few inches. One by one, the energy fields disappeared. The cities came back to life. They had passed the first test, but everyone knew this was just the beginning. The next day, Commander He-jin appeared again. "Interesting solution," he said. "Now for a more complex challenge. We have created a virus that makes people fall asleep. It will spread unless you can create a cure. But to make it more interesting, you must choose. You can save either all adults or all children, but not both." This test was cruel. It forced humans to make an impossible choice. But Lieutenant Soo-min Lee, a young doctor working with Dr. Kim, saw something important in the virus's structure. "Look at this," she said, showing her findings to Dr. Kim and Captain Park. "The virus isn't really different for adults and children. They're trying to trick us. They want to see if we'll fight among ourselves, trying to choose who to save." Dr. Kim studied the virus samples. "You're right. They expect us to accept their rules without questioning them. But that's not what humans do. Instead of choosing between adults and children, Earth's scientists worked together to find a different solution. They discovered that the virus had the same perfect, predictable pattern as everything else the Onjin made. By changing the pattern slightly, they could make a cure that would work for everyone." Commander He-jin seemed surprised when they presented their solution. His perfect face showed confusion for the first time. "You were supposed to choose," he said. "This is not how the test was designed. We chose to save everyone." Jae-yun told him. "That was our choice." The tests kept coming. Each one was designed to force humans to make terrible choices or solve seemingly impossible problems. The Onjin made them solve complex mathematical equations that they said would take 1,000 years. But humans worked together, using computers in new ways to find answers. They created challenges that they said would divide humanity, offering advanced technology to some countries but not others. Instead, Earth's nations shared everything they learned. This seemed to confuse the Onjin even more. One evening, Dr. Kim called Jae-yun to his lab again. "Captain, look at this," he said, showing her some old space telescope data. "I found records of other star systems the Onjin visited, every system they went to. The civilizations there disappeared after the testing." Jae-yun felt cold. "They're not just testing us. They're looking for excuses to eliminate us." "Yes, but they're making mistakes," Taiwan said. "They don't understand why we keep solving their tests in unexpected ways. Their perfect patterns don't work against human creativity." As if to prove this point, the next test came that night. The Onjin created storms across Earth's oceans, threatening to flood coastal cities. They said humans had to choose which cities to save with their advanced force fields. They only offered enough to protect half of them. Instead of choosing, humans found a way to modify the force field technology. They discovered that the perfect energy patterns could be split and shared, like dividing light through a prism. They protected all the cities with weaker fields instead of just saving some with strong ones. Supreme Observer Do-hyun himself appeared this time. "Your species continues to break testing protocols," he said. "This is not how these evaluations are meant to proceed. Maybe your tests need to change," Jae-yun suggested. "Humanity doesn't fit into perfect patterns. That's our strength." The Onjin leaders met in their crystal ships. Through the transparent walls, humans could see them discussing, their movements as perfect and programmed as ever. But something was different now. They seemed unsure. Dr. Kim gathered Earth's leaders to share what he had learned. "Every test they give us shows us more about how their minds work," he explained. "They can't understand solutions that don't fit their patterns. They've become so dependent on their perfect technology that they've lost the ability to think in new ways." Jae-yun added, "And each time we solve a test differently than they expected, their responses become more predictable. They're showing us their weaknesses. The Onjin announced there would be one final test, the hardest one yet. But now Earth wasn't afraid. With each challenge, humans had grown stronger, learning more about their advanced but limited testers. As they prepared for the final test, Jai-Yun looked at the crystal ships hanging in space above Earth. "They came to test us," she said to Dr. Kim. "But I don't think they realized they were testing themselves too." The Onjin's perfect patterns were about to meet human unpredictability one last time. And this time, Earth was ready to show them just how dangerous it could be to underestimate humanity's ability to think outside their perfect boxes. Lieutenant Su-Min Lee walked quickly through the underground bunker beneath Seoul, carrying a small device she and Dr. Kim had built. The device looked simple, just a metal box with a few lights, but it was the result of 3 weeks of studying the Onjin's communication patterns. She found Dr. Kim and Captain Park in the main control room, looking at screens showing the Onjin ships in orbit. "It's working," she said, putting the device on the table. "We can read their transmissions now." Dr. Kim picked up the device carefully. After weeks of watching the Onjin's tests, they had noticed that all their communications followed the same perfect patterns as everything else they did. This made their signals easy to predict, and now to decode. "What have we learned?" Jai-Yun asked, looking at the streams of data flowing across the screens. "They're afraid," Su-Min said. "Not of us exactly, but of how we keep solving their tests in ways they didn't expect. Their messages show they don't know what to do about it." Dr. Kim nodded. "Look at this part," he said, pointing to one message. "They're talking about their real purpose here. They want to either make us their servants or eliminate us completely. They've done this to other civilizations before." Jai-Yun felt anger rise in her chest, but she stayed calm. "How many other civilizations?" "At least 7 that we can see in their records," Su-Min answered. "They call it maintaining cosmic harmony, but really they just destroy any species that doesn't fit their perfect patterns." In another part of the bunker, Colonel Minji Kang was working with Earth's military leaders. They had been quietly preparing defenses, hiding them in ways the Onjin's perfect scanning patterns wouldn't detect. The Onjin always look for things in straight lines and perfect circles, Minji explained to the other officers. "So we're positioning everything in random patterns. Their scans just slide right past them." The humans had learned something else important about the Onjin. They couldn't understand randomness. Their minds, so dependent on their advanced AI systems, could only think in perfect patterns. This was becoming humanity's greatest advantage. One day, the Onjin sent a message that proved humans were right about them. Supreme Observer Du-Hyun appeared on all screens again. "Your species continues to behave in concerning ways," he said. "You solve our tests, but not in the approved manner. This creates disorder. We have decided to accelerate your evaluation." Dr. Kim was ready for this. He had studied every test, every pattern, and every response from the Onjin. "They're going to try something big," he told the others. "But they can only do what their programming allows. They can't create new plans." He was right. The Onjin launched their biggest test yet. They shut down the sun. Their ships created a field around the star that dimmed its light, threatening to freeze Earth. "You have 2 options," Commander He-jin announced. "Accept our direct control over your civilization, or face extinction. You have 6 hours to decide." But humanity had been preparing for something like this. Hyun-Ki, Earth's best computer expert, had discovered something about the Onjin's technology. All their devices needed perfect conditions to work. Even tiny disruptions could break their patterns. While the Onjin waited for Earth to surrender, humans put their own plan into action. They had built thousands of small, simple devices that created random energy pulses. These pulses weren't powerful enough to harm anything, but they disrupted the perfect patterns the Onjin relied on. "Launch the disruptors," Colonel Minji ordered. Across Earth and Mars, the devices activated. They created chaos in the Onjin's perfect patterns, static in their communications, errors in their calculations, gaps in their energy fields. The effect was immediate. The Onjin ships began to move in confused patterns. Their perfect formation broke apart. The field around the sun flickered and failed. "What are you doing?" Supreme Observer Du Hyun demanded. For the first time, his perfect voice showed real emotion. Fear. "This is not an acceptable response to the test." "We're not taking your test anymore," Jae-yun replied. "We're giving you one instead." Dr. Kim watched the Onjin ships trying to restore order to their systems. "They can't adapt," he said. "Their minds are too rigid. They've forgotten how to handle anything that doesn't fit their patterns." The humans didn't attack the Onjin ships. They didn't need to. The random disruptions were enough to throw all their systems into chaos. The mighty alien fleet that had arrived to test humanity was now drifting in space, their perfect patterns broken. Lieutenant Sumin's device picked up the panicked messages between the Onjin ships. Their leaders couldn't agree on what to do. Their programs hadn't prepared them for this situation. Some wanted to retreat, others wanted to keep trying to restore order, but none of them could think of new solutions. "They're like machines that can only follow their programming," Sumin explained to the others. "When something doesn't fit their program, they just get stuck in a loop." Colonel Minji saw an opportunity. If we push them a little more, they might leave on their own. They can't stand disorder. It goes against everything they believe in. They were right. After hours of trying to restore their perfect patterns and failing, the Onjin fleet began to retreat. Their ships formed an uneven line, no longer the perfect formation they had arrived in, and prepared to leave the solar system. Supreme Observer Du Hyun made one final transmission. "Your species has failed the evaluation," he said, but his voice lacked its former confidence. "You create too much chaos. You cannot be part of cosmic harmony." "We create change," Jae-yun corrected him. "That's how life grows. Perfect patterns can't evolve." As the Onjin ships disappeared into deep space, humanity began to study the technology they had learned about during the tests. But they did it their way. Messy, creative, and always changing. Dr. Kim gathered all the data they had collected about the Onjin. "We should share this with everyone," he said. "Not just the technology, but what we learned about them. The next time someone comes to test us, we'll be ready." "They tested our patience," Jae-yun said, watching the last Onjin ship vanish from the sensors. "But they ended up testing themselves instead, and they're the ones who failed." Humanity had faced its greatest challenge yet, and they had won not by being the strongest or most advanced, but by being what they had always been: unpredictable, creative, and impossible to put in a perfect pattern. 3 days after the Onjin fleet retreated, they returned. This time, their crystal ships formed a perfect sphere around Earth. Supreme Observer Du Hyun's face appeared on every screen and device on the planet, his perfect features now showing clear signs of stress. "Humans of Earth," he said, "your resistance to proper testing procedures has forced us to implement our final evaluation. We will no longer waste time with small tests. You have 1 day to accept our ultimate requirement, or face extinction." In the underground command center, Dr. Kim watched the transmission with Captain Jae-yun Park and Lieutenant Soo-min Liddy. They had expected the Onjin to return, but not so soon. "What's their ultimate requirement?" Jae-yun asked, though she already suspected the answer. The Supreme Observer continued, "Your species must accept genetic modification. We will reshape your DNA to follow proper patterns. You will become suitable members of cosmic society. This is not a request. It is a requirement for your survival." Hyun Ki, who had been monitoring the Onjin's communications, spoke up from his computer station. "They're scared," he said. "Look at their ship formations. The patterns aren't as perfect as before. They're trying too hard to maintain order." Dr. Kim nodded. "They're afraid because we showed them something they didn't think was possible. A species that could break their patterns and still succeed. It goes against everything they believe." Colonel Minji Kang entered the room with new information from Earth's defense systems. "The Onjin ships are different this time," she said. They've modified their shields to resist our disruption devices. They learned from their last failure. But that's exactly what we wanted, Su-min said, smiling. They think they've fixed their weakness, but they've actually shown us something more important. They can only change in predictable ways. Over the past few days, Earth's scientists and military leaders had prepared for this moment. They knew the Onjin would try to force humanity to change, to become as rigid and predictable as they were. But humans had a different plan. Jai-yun called a meeting with all of Earth's defense leaders. The Onjin think they're giving us our final test, she said, but we're actually giving them theirs. Everything is ready. Colonel Minji pulled up a map showing thousands of small dots scattered around the planet, all in place. Every city, every town, even remote areas, we've spread our surprise everywhere. Not in patterns, but in random places they won't expect. What the humans had built wasn't weapons, they were something much simpler. Thousands of small transmitters, each broadcasting random signals on different frequencies. Alone, each transmitter was too weak to affect the Onjin systems. But together, they would create something the aliens couldn't handle. Pure chaos. Remember, Dr. Kim told the leaders, the Onjin's greatest weakness isn't in their technology. It's in their minds. They've forgotten how to handle anything that doesn't follow their rules. As the deadline approached, Supreme Observer Do-hyun appeared again. Your time is nearly finished. What is your answer? Jai-yun stood before the transmission camera. We have an answer for you, she said. But first, we want to show you something about humanity. She gave the signal. Across the planet, the transmitters activated. Each one sent out different signals. Some were music, some were random numbers, some were just noise. The signals bounced off buildings, mountains, and the ocean, creating patterns that constantly changed. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then the Onjin ships began to move strangely. Their perfect sphere formation started to break apart. The random signals were affecting their systems in ways their rigid minds couldn't predict or counter. What are you doing? Do-hyun demanded. Stop this disorder immediately. This isn't disorder, Jai-yun replied calmly. This is life. Real life isn't about perfect patterns. It's about adaptation, creativity, and change. The Onjin ships tried to restore their formation, but they couldn't. Each time they started to create a pattern, the random signals would change it. Their systems, designed to work only in perfect order, began to fail. Su-min's communication device picked up the chaos in the Onjin fleet. Their ships are arguing with each other, she reported. Half want to retreat, half want to attack. They can't agree because their programming doesn't tell them what to do in this situation. Hyun-ki added more chaos to the mix. He had designed a program that sent false signals to the Onjin ships, making each ship think the others were moving in different patterns. The aliens' perfect coordination fell apart completely. You leave us no choice, Supreme Observer Do-hyun announced. We must eliminate your species to restore order. But when the Onjin tried to power up their weapons, nothing worked properly. The random signals had corrupted their targeting systems. Their weapons, which needed perfect calculations to work, couldn't lock onto anything. Then Dr. Kim activated the final part of humanity's plan. Hidden transmitters on Mars and the Moon joined those on Earth, surrounding the Onjin fleet in a sphere of chaos, using their own favorite shape against them. The mighty alien ships that had come to test humanity began to retreat in disorder. Their perfect formations were gone. Some ships bumped into each other, their coordination completely broken. The Supreme Observer's final transmission was cut off mid-sentence as his ship's communications failed. Within hours, the Onjin fleet had left the solar system, leaving behind some of their damaged ships. Earth scientists would study these ships, learning from their technology while avoiding the mistakes their creators had made. In the command center, Jai-yun watched the last alien ship disappear from their sensors. They came to test if we were worthy of joining their idea of cosmic society, she said. They never considered that their society might not be worthy of us. Dr. Kim was already studying data from the abandoned Anjin ships. Their technology is amazing, he said, but they used it to make themselves weaker, not stronger. They forgot that the ability to adapt and change is what keeps life growing. Colonel Minji began organizing teams to collect the alien technology. We'll learn from their knowledge, she said, but we'll use it our way. Messy, creative, and always changing. Su Min looked at the star maps showing the Anjin's retreat. Do you think they learned anything from this? Maybe, Jia Yun said, but more importantly, we learned something about ourselves. Humanity isn't perfect, and we never will be. That's what makes us strong. In the months that followed, Earth used what they learned from the Anjin to advance their technology, but they were careful to keep what made them human. Their creativity, their ability to adapt, and their acceptance of chaos as part of life. They set up new defenses too, ready for any other advanced races that might come to test them. But they made sure these defenses were as unpredictable as humanity itself. The Anjin had come to test Earth's patience. Instead, they became a lesson in history, a reminder that true advancement comes not from achieving perfection, but from embracing the beautiful chaos of life and growth. As Dr. Kim often said in the years that followed, they thought they were testing us, but they really tested themselves. They found out that the most advanced civilization isn't the one with the most perfect patterns. It's the one that knows how to dance with chaos and keep growing.